So, hi everybody. Welcome to, I guess, this session during the COVID epidemic. I'm glad you could make it. My name is Dan Panosian. I'm a comic book artist and writer. I do graphic design, and I also do video game design, anything with drawing almost. I was lucky. My father was an artist, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So I began doing this at a very young age, even while I was in high school. So I began drawing illustrations for role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons when I was about 14 years old. And not a lot of it, but enough that I kept learning and doing more and more artwork for more and more companies, bigger companies along the way, until finally, when I was about 21 years old, I moved to New York City and started working for Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and Continuity Graphics, which was an advertising agency, but it also they also created comic books. And working there and working at the business at a young age and never turning down work, I did a lot of work in my 20s, and that was nearly 30 years ago. So it's exciting. It's a very exciting job in the sense that you're always learning, just like you guys are at school. And you know, if you have that passion, which I'm sure you do, you know, you're always going to be fulfilled in that way. You're always going to be excited to continue to be able to reach people through your artwork. My father, he grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and he's the firstborn of his Armenian parents who escaped the massacre, and it weighed heavily on him as a young man and boy. And we were very active in our Armenian community. There's a big Armenian community in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up, and there's a big community out here in Los Angeles, very big. It's I think Serge Tarkanian has, you know, he lives out here right now. I think he's, I guess, in New Zealand, from what I understand, but a big Armenian community out here. So, you know, Armenians typically are always there for each other. And it's nice to have that. Roger Kapelian, who I'm sure he's visited the school by now, maybe a few times. And he's, you know, tremendous artist. And he's worked in all sorts of different aspects of Hollywood, even as a filmmaker himself, very famous for doing Lord of the Rings. But I met him through the Armenian community out here. I just got a question, says, have you ever met Stan Lee? And I have. Stan Lee, I had the opportunity to meet with him a few times. I've been on some television programs with him. And the interesting thing about him was, I think he passed away, he was 94 years old, but very, very sharp man, very good sense of humor, very funny guy, and had a kind word for everyone, a lot of energy for a man that old. My Armenian grandmother was about 94 when she passed away. And of course, Armenians have a lot of energy too, as you know. But Stan Lee was quite a character. To meet a legend like that, a man who changed the whole world with his vision, is very inspiring. So maybe I'll have that effect on people one day. I doubt it, but it's, you know, you have the opportunity as an artist to reach a lot of people with your work. For me, artwork is all about conveying an emotion, a feeling, and it's your feeling, your personal. I've had an opportunity to see a lot of photographs and a lot of video about the school, and it's mind-blowing. Everyone there is very, very fortunate that it is such it's number one, a beautiful school, and the technology there, the setting, the environment is all very conducive to learning and getting better and being inspired by people around you. I didn't have the opportunity to go to art school, but a lot of artists will say, well, I did it all by myself, and it's something I'm supposed to be proud of. But going to school, I can look at almost any artist and tell whether or not they've been to school or not, because there's something about that academic training that gives an artist a bit of a head start. You're basically learning things that take years to learn, and you're getting kind of a head start in that direction, and someone's letting you, so you don't have to make some of these mistakes to learn. That's a very important part of learning. But if you can speed up that process, that's going to help take you to a place where you can better, once again, express yourself visually, which is everything in this business, particularly with me, with comic books. If I get a script or I'm writing a script, I want to be able to convey exactly what's going on in that panel. And a comic book panel is just like a storyboard panel or a screenshot from a movie that you're watching. It has to say something, and if it doesn't, if it's generic or it's it doesn't convey emotion of if someone's angry or passionate, or there's loss or love, if it doesn't show that, then you're missing the mark, and you're not giving 100% of yourself to your work. So I hope not. For my sake, I'd be out of a job. Digitally, there's a lot of advantages right now that when I first started weren't there. The biggest impact the digital age has had on comics is coloring. Most of the coloring done in comic books is done in Photoshop or Clip Studios. There's other programs too I use, but those are the big ones. And I think they dramatically help save you time, energy, and if you've ever picked up a comic book of any kind, whether it's a European graphic novel, a BD, or manga from Japan, or an American comic book, you'll notice the coloring is significantly better nowadays than it was, say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. The printing is better too, and that's also an aspect of printing. Digital printing is huge. So I had to learn, I taught myself Photoshop, but again, you guys have all sorts of fantastic computers, and I'm sure courses on color and how to execute these programs. And some of it there is pretty extensive, but with a proper artistic background, that is the biggest element, because there's lots of fancy tricks you can do in Photoshop, ways to enhance the work. But ultimately, it comes down to your level of skill as an artist and how you interpret your surroundings. And if you have the skills to take what's here and put it there on the paper. Well, that's an interesting question, because it depends on the genre. I mean, when I was growing up, all I cared about was superhero comic books, and I also loved Conan the Barbarian. But nowadays, I love crime comic books, like the work of here's something I'm reading right now, Fatale by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. That's the type of work I like. I like doing crime books now. But who knows? I might do a book about feudal Japan, or a book about Jack the Ripper, or it's whatever inspires you. And that's what's, there's going to be jobs that you take that you are doing strictly for the money or the experience. And then there's going to be projects that you do that come from the heart. Like, for instance, that comic book Slots was very near and dear to my heart. And so while I was working on it, it never felt like work. It always felt like I got to, do whatever my hobby is. That's what it's always felt like. Draw lots of comic book pages. Don't, obviously when you first start, you're going to spend hours and hours and hours on a single comic book page, but you have to get yourself to a point where you can do a page a day, ideally, if you want to have a job in the comic book world. So speed is very important. So, and also you get better by doing. So if you're drawing the same, you know, it's like if you play basketball or a sport, let's say you're doing the free throw for basketball. Well, you can study that basket and you can have the ball in your hand and you can look at it and you can try to get that perfect angle before you shoot. You go, maybe it'd be better if I stand here, maybe it'd be better if I stand over here, before you shoot it, to try to get that perfect shot. Or the better basketball player is going to be the guy who just keeps shooting, keeps practicing and keeps making that shot, because the more you do something, the better you are at it. The more comic book pages you draw, the better you're going to get at it. If the student who draws like 5 exceptional comic book pages, but it took them, you know, a whole semester to draw them, well, the guy who drew 30 pages that maybe don't look as good, he's going to have more experience than the other comic book artist. He's going to have looked at scripts and analyzed those scripts and drawn those things. He's just going to be, he or she is going to be a better artist in the long term. It's all about practicing and not looking back, learning what you can from the mistakes you've made on one comic book page and applying them to the next page, and just keep moving forward, keep building on that work. And like I said, be very, very critical of your work. Like, look at it and don't say, well, I'm better than the worst guy at Marvel or DC. You want to be as good as the best guy, and that should be where you want to see yourself. Marvel has a team devoted to finding talent around the world. And DC also hires everybody around the world. Some of the best artists working at Marvel Comics and DC Comics and Image Comics don't live in the United States. They live, say, in Argentina, or they live in Italy or France, or you know, Bosnia. I mean, it's very, very global. So the key to being hired by like a Marvel or DC is to look at your work. If that's, obviously you're talking to a comic book guy, so I can just speak on comics, but the key is to look at your work and look at the work that's being published by a company that you want to work for. So say you want to work for Marvel Comics, the best thing you can do is pick up a few Marvel comics, look at the artwork, and then ask yourself, if you're an editor, you know, would you hire you? Like, you already have this artist, but would you say that something happens to them, or they're going to replace them, or that artist moves on? Are you as talented? Are you as this artist? And if you are, and you send your work to Marvel, there's a very, very good chance they'll hire you. So it's 100% dependent on your ability to analyze your own work, critique your work, and recognize your strengths, and also recognize what you need to work on, what you need to improve. You know, maybe you need to improve your backgrounds, how you draw buildings or settings. Maybe your anatomy needs work, or maybe just how you compose a comic book page. There's so many different aspects to this job, and not everyone is good across the board on everything. A lot of times one artist is very good at one thing, but they need a little work in something else. And what you're trying to do is get all those levels the same. You know, this one artist might excel with, like, you know, fight scenes or quiet moments. There's places for, you know, every type of artist, but you want to make sure that you're as good as the people your publisher is already hiring, because they're not going to take a chance on you. They want you ready and able to do that work. They're hiring you as a professional, and so they're not going to. This sort of world is not a place to get your training. Right now, you're in training in school, so you can, when you graduate, you can prepare a portfolio, or maybe you've done some work in some smaller comic books to really gain that experience. certainly, you can always do that. I don't know if you want to send them to the school and the school can send them directly to me. That's one way to do it, but I'd love to take a look. There's a website called DeviantArt. It's kind of like Facebook, but for artists. And it's just, I believe it's just Deviant, DEVIANT art.com. And I have a profile there, also Urban Barbarian. And there's a section in there of journals, and I've written some articles on how to break into comic books. And really, for me, it all comes down to you, like how you look at your work and how you see it from a realistic sense. You're always going to have your family and your friends adore your work, and that's important to have that encouragement. But you have to have that critical eye and look at it. And obviously, you want to love your own work. You don't want to be so critical that you don't enjoy it anymore. But you want to have a critical eye in the sense that you're able to look at the things you need to work on, and you're always striving to improve those things. So I think, you'll know when you're ready to send something into like a Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Image Comics, or Dark Horse Comics, or maybe it's a French comic book company like Les Lombards or Klinene in France. So I've surrounded myself just by luck with very talented artists that will critique my work, and maybe I'll critique theirs back and forth. And it's very, very helpful to get an honest look at what you do. I keep saying that a lot, but to me, that's my secret, I guess. It looks like we're done. That went quicker than I thought. I hope I didn't bore anybody. Maybe I inspired some people. So thank you for watching, and good luck in your studies. And I hope you cherish your time there at the school. It looks amazing, and use your friends, your teachers, and everyone around you to inspire you and help bring you to a better place with your artwork. So cheers. Bye, you guys. You share.